Is Nandrolone, aka Deca, aka NPP, safe for your hair? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Before we get into Nandrolone itself, we need to lay some groundwork about how hair loss works in the body. We're going to start off talking about testosterone basically, because that's kind of the root cause of most androgenic alopecia in men. So once we lay that groundwork, then we'll dive into Nandrolone itself afterwards so that you guys can actually understand what it is that I'm trying to say. So the first thing that we want to talk about is the 5-alpha reductase enzyme, or the 5-AR enzyme. This is an enzyme that's in your body, in your prostate, in your muscle tissues, and just in your body in general, in your hair follicles, etc. And what this enzyme does is it converts testosterone into DHT, or that's one of the things that it does, I should say. This is the main cause of androgenic alopecia or hair loss, since DHT binds to the hair follicles and miniaturizes them. So basically you have this 5-alpha reductase enzyme in your body. When you produce or inject testosterone into your body, that testosterone kind of meets that 5-alpha reductase enzyme and then gets converted into DHT, which then binds to your hair follicles, causes them to get smaller until eventually your hair disappears. So that's where we get into a medication like Finasteride, which is a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. There is also Dutasteride, which does the same thing but more effectively and more selectively, or less selectively I should say, because there's two different 5-AR enzymes. There's type 1 and type 2. That's besides the point, I digress. Finasteride is a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, so basically it prevents the 5-alpha reductase enzymes from doing that job that I just said. It prevents them from taking your testosterone, converting it into DHT, which then makes you lose your hair. So if you take Finasteride and it prevents that conversion from happening, there is now less DHT in your body to bind to your hair follicles and cause them to miniaturize. But there is also now more testosterone in the body, which can also miniaturize your hair, just less impactfully than DHT does. But since your testosterone is now not being converted to DHT, it means there's more of it that's left over in your body. So that can also bind to your hair and cause it to miniaturize, but it's not as damaging compared to DHT. So if you take Finasteride, basically you end up with something less damaging to your hair. You get rid of the root cause, but you kind of have this secondary possible cause of hair loss, which would be the remaining testosterone now. That's where something like RU58841 would come in, which is a topical anti-androgen. I have a video on my channel of me applying this stuff and another video of me talking about what it is and why I use it. But basically, you apply it to your scalp and it's supposed to bind to your androgen receptors in your scalp and prevent testosterone from binding to them because it's keeping them busy. Right? If you're not using RU58841, you have all this testosterone in your system, it's going to start binding to your hair follicles and cause you to lose them over time. So you kind of use this RU58841 stuff to keep the hair follicles busy, in a sense. It's like blocking the testosterone from attaching to them because this stuff is already attached to them, right? You have this receptor. Normally testosterone would go into it, but now you put the RU58841 into it, and then the testosterone comes along and it's like, oh shit, this hair follicle is taken already. I can't sit here. RU58841 has a higher binding affinity than testosterone does, but not higher than DHT. What that means is if DHT is trying to bind to this hair follicle and testosterone is trying to bind to this hair follicle, and you're using this RU58841 stuff and that's trying to bind to the hair follicle, DHT has the highest binding affinity, which means DHT is going to win. DHT is going to bind to it. It's going to tell the other guys, just get out of here. I'm about to destroy this fucking hair follicle and you're going to get miniaturized and lose your hair. If you get the DHT out of the way with something like Finasteride or Dutasteride, then you end up with testosterone and the RU58841 competing for this receptor. And since the RU58841 has a higher binding affinity, it means the RU58841 is going to get in there and the testosterone is not, basically, which is exactly what you want. Okay, so now that we have that groundwork laid out, now we can actually talk about Nandrolone. Nandrolone converts to 5-A dihydro-19 nortestosterone via the 5-AR enzyme. So, like we talked about in the beginning, this 5-alpha reductase enzyme, it takes your testosterone, converts it into DHT. DHT damages your hair more than testosterone. So you want to prevent that conversion from happening, right? You don't want the testosterone to be converted into DHT, because the DHT is going to fuck up your hair. Well, Nandrolone converts to this other thing called 5A dihydro-19-nor, and that is less damaging to hair follicles than DHT and less damaging to hair follicles than testosterone is. So you actually want this conversion to happen, right? Because it starts off as something, Nandrolone, that can damage your hair pretty badly, but Nandrolone can convert to this weaker metabolite that doesn't damage your hair so badly. So you want that to happen, right? Now, the problem with this is that if you're using finasteride, it's going to prevent this conversion from happening because finasteride prevents the 5-alpha reductase enzyme from doing its job. So the Nandrolone is going to go into your body. You have the 5-AR enzyme that wants to convert it into the weaker thing, but the finasteride is like, nope, you're not making that conversion. And then now you just have this extremely damaging Nandrolone, which can destroy your hair. So basically, what's going to happen is if you use finasteride with Nandrolone, you're going to end up with more hair loss than you would if you just use Nandrolone by itself. Because if you use it by itself, it's going to get converted into the weak thing, the 5-alpha dihydro-19-nor testosterone. If you add finasteride into the mix there, it's going to prevent that from happening, and then you're going to end up with more hair loss because now you have all the Nandrolone just floating around in your system. This gets more complicated if you're using a testosterone base with Nandrolone, which you probably should be. I know some people do Nandrolone only cycles out there. I don't really recommend it. Well, I don't recommend anything because, I'm not a doctor, but if you're running a test base with Nandrolone, the problem here is that it gets complicated, right? Because with test, you do want finasteride because the finasteride prevents testosterone from converting to DHT. You want that conversion to be prevented in that case. But if you have test and NAND, you have one variable where you don't want the conversion to happen, and then you have the other one where you do want the conversion to happen. So it gets a little bit complicated in this situation. So basically, I guess the conclusion of all this is, theoretically, Nandrolone could be safe on your hair if you ran it by itself without finasteride and without testosterone. I definitely would not recommend Nandrolone only with no testosterone base. So my takeaway from this would be, it's not safe on your hair because with the caveat added that you want to be running it with testosterone, there's really no way to do that without something damaging your hair because you're either going to have DHT or you're going to have Nandrolone not getting converted into 5-alpha, whatever the hell it's called. So one way or another, you're screwed basically. I got some of this information from 2 different studies. One of them is called Beyond Testosterone Cypionate, Evidence Behind the Use of Nandrolone in Male Health and Wellness, and the other one is Relative Binding Affinity of Anabolic Androgenic Steroids, Comparison of the Binding, blah, blah, blah. I'll link both of these in the description so that you guys can go through them. That is going to be it for this video. If you want to see more content like this, please hit the buttons, like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.